Hello and welcome again to the Writer Review. This is Eric Corrupt Writer, and this week we're going to be taking a look back at the 2019 science fiction comedy movie titled James versus His Future Self. Now, James versus His Future Self runs for 1 hour and 34 minutes long. It is directed by Jeremy Lalonde. It is produced by a 3J trifecta, better known as Jonathan Bronfman, Jonas Chernick, and Jordan Walker. Like I said, 3J right there. Alright, the script was written by Jeremy Lalonde and Jonas Chernick. And let's see, the score was done by Stephen Krekalo and Ian LaFave. The cinematography by Scott McClellan, and it was edited by Jeremy Lalonde. And the stars of this movie are Jonas Chernick, Daniel Stern, that's right, Marv himself from the Home Alone movies, and, of course, City Slickers, Diner, Major League. Yep, Daniel Stern is in this. We also have Cleopatra Coleman, Francis, Conroy, Tommie, Amber-Pirie, and if you are a Canadian, you'll probably may remember the TV series Corner Gas. The reason why I brought this up was because one of the cast members from Corner Gas actually appears in this movie. I'm talking about Officer Karen Pelly herself. Tara Spencer-Nairn is in this movie as well. And guess what? She is back as a cop. Imagine that. It's like she's never lost a badge. Okay. Now in this movie, I ask you all, how would you react if someone looks like an elder version of yourself walked in on you and told you things about what the future has in store for you? I'm sure you'll be amazed, intrigued, and even a bit intimidated at the same time. And suppose that he, she, or they was sent here to warn you about the grave dangers lurking ahead if you continue into a path where if you put yourself into a predicament and you will regret it for the rest of your life. Well, there is the concept of this indie film, James versus His Future Self, which may lack in originality. It still scores big with its unorthodox style, with a moral message that is neither ham-fisted or preachy. So the story goes a little something like this. Jonas Chernick plays James, an enthusiastic inventor who is in the process of creating a scientific breakthrough. He is creating a time-traveling apparatus. So, where did we heard that before? Back to the Future, maybe? I know I'm going to probably make some comparisons to Back to the Future, but this is definitely truly not going to be, a movie about space travel or time travel or anything like that. So rest assured you, this is no Back to the Future anyway. The guy is pretty much dedicated to his job. Sometimes he just seems more engaged to his job than his own personal livelihood. I mean, the guy practically lives off of his invention of building a time-traveling machine. In hopes to, for what? For what purpose? Just to go back in time? Try to rewrite history? Creating something called the butterfly effect? Where if you try to rearrange, and rewrite history, that everything is gonna just go by smoothly and things will be forgotten. No. If you try and go back in time in history, like take for example, you should not invent the light bulb during the Stone Age period. That's kind of like what could happen if you did travel back in time. I know I use that kind of like as a metaphor, but that's kind of like what would happen if you tried to mess with the past. And I think this movie truly epitomizes that analogy to a max. All is going well for him until a mysterious older stranger who goes by the name of Jimmy, played by Daniel Stern, claims that he is no ordinary old individual. No, he is actually James from the future, and he has come to warn him that inventing time travel is a thing that he will end up regretting he ever invented in the first place. And if he continues to build this machine, it won't be a breakthrough in science and humanity, but a world where disasters could turn his world upside down. And though the disasters are not fully fleshed out, but Jimmy's words of advice seem so sincere and urgent that we are left with no choice but to believe him. But the problem is, James is so stubborn, he refuses to listen to reason. So, practically, Jimmy's job is quite simple. To just simply make James's life a living hell. Like, interfering in his lifetime, interfering in his personal life, which he doesn't really have very much of. Even though he's got a good thing going with the relationship with his fellow partner, played by Cleopatra Coleman. As you can see where her name is, what her character's name is, I would probably. Okay, her name is Courtney. Well, he and his fellow assistant Courtney might probably have more than just, scientific partners. We could be seeing a potential relationship building around James and Courtney. But the problem is, James is just so preoccupied with his time travel machine, he just doesn't have time for anything else. He doesn't have time for family too much. He doesn't really have time for anything. I mean, even when he eats, he's like, usually eats in a rush, and then it's back to building his time machine. I mean, everything else is all just insignificant. That he just never has time for anything. I mean, he's practically married to his job. He's one of those kind of people who are married to their own jobs. That they just don't have time for anything else. And that's just how his character operates. Jimmy is trying to tell James that he's got a good thing going with himself in the present, and that there's still a lot of good things to come out in the future. And that's kind of like what Jimmy's motive is. It's not to try to ruin his life. It's not to try to raid his refrigerator or just be a nuisance. Even though it looks like he's just being a mischievous nuisance, getting in his way, doing things. But he's only just doing it because he cares. But James himself, he just won't listen. So he has to use a little persuasion, even if it means getting in his way, creating nuisance, and doing a little mischief. He's not doing it out of bad content, but he's just trying to do it so that Jonas can, well, so that James, well, it is Jonas Chernick, so that James could see where he's going wrong and to try to fix his own problem before it becomes inevitably too late. So then we gotta ask ourselves, why are bad decisions and humanity are so compatible with each other? For two simple reasons. The first, we never think about consequences, and that out hunger and obsession for experiments are what drives us to beyond the boundaries. In other words, you think that maybe something might be like a simple solution. Well, be that as it may, we all want to try to live our lives in a more simplistic way as much as possible. But then sometimes doing so could be virtually impossible because of consequences. Sometimes the solution could be more deadlier than the problem. I mean, science says, like, take for example, I hate to bring this up in my presentations, but like, take for example, COVID-19. Science is saying we should be staying home as much as possible, not to go near people for within the 2 meter boundary, wash our hands, wear a mask. Be that as it may, I follow the procedures, I do what they say. But then you also sometimes have to realize that even those have consequences too. And we don't know if this is actually really a bright decision or a decision that we have to take, even if we don't particularly like. But still, somehow, solutions could probably also be very consequential to the already ongoing problem. Locking down could cause a lot of things, like an economic collapse. It could also cause other essential things, like a potential recession. Mental health issues, depression, suicide, the feeling the need for deprivation, the feeling that you are imprisoned in your own planet because of authoritarian draconian measures, which may be something we don't want but something we need, but also there is danger within those parameters as well. So, it's like you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. Do we all agree to this? Not necessarily. Does it have to be done? I'm sure we have to go through these things, but also at the same time, what price is there to pay if we are all forced to stay at home and keep a physical distance and wear a mask and wear hand sanitizer? Yes, it is important to stay healthy, clean, and immaculate, but at the same time, what about some of the other consequences that we have to go through just to sacrifice ourselves in order to curb the virus? Flatten the curve, so that they always say. And the question we also have to ask us, does lockdowns actually really work? Many people say, we locked down, we stayed at home, we tried to flatten the curve, and all of a sudden it just came back again. So sometimes we have to wonder, does that even help? Some people are just saying that we should think of another strategy that isn't so draconian, but could still be effective in flattening the curve. Some people say that maybe it should be, up to the government to protect the sick and the vulnerable and let the healthy just live their lives. Either way, there's a lot of not black and white area, but a lot of gray in no matter what argument you wish to make. So this is where we have the things about bad decisions and humanity seem to have some kind of level of compatibility. And also, scientific breakthroughs become sources for fame. Publicity comes with awards, accolades, a place in the fields of science. Like in the case of James versus his future self, he probably thinks that this whole scientific breakthrough will give him exceptional fame. It'll make him it'll make him a star in the scientific community. And that his publicity is going to be like through the roof. He'll probably get TV deals. He'll probably get to go on lecturing tours. And, I know I'm taking stuff from Little Shop of Horrors, the song that I performed, the meek shall inherit. This whole scientific breakthrough that James is conducting with the time travel machine. This could bring him exceptional fame, a lot of money. He'll have his face splashed on the cover of magazines in science. He'll probably get a TV deal. He'll probably go on lecturing tours. And maybe many people will want to go out and purchase their own time travel machine. But when you think about it, is this really going to work? Is this really what he wants? Maybe he might be blinded by the potential fame and publicity, but then there's also a price to pay when it comes down to that too. He doesn't realize that there's going to be a lot of dire consequences if he does. And this is the reason why his future self has materialized. He's not out to, cause any kind of heartbreak or pain towards the young James. He just wants to set him straight. And another thing that we do is we tend to dismiss the older generation who defy the younger generation that new inventions never work and that the better things of life are right in front of you. Yes, I know sometimes we tend to often dismiss the older generation because, hey, well, they're old, they're out of touch. Maybe what happened to them in the past may be effective then, but this is the now. This is where the end thing comes in. This is, the newfangled stuff that we are now adapting to, and it's just a shame that they haven't really adapted to our new ways because they're still stuck in the past, adapting to the ways that they wish to never let go. So yeah. But when you think about it, not all inventions work. Not everything in the scientific community has always been a big success. And that's kind of a shame. And I think that's what you see in the futures, the younger or the older version of James. And in some ways, it also shows a little bit of discrimination against the older generation, because the older generations always tends to somewhat have this bad habit of either dismissing our new ways, saying that we're just a bunch of lazy freeloaders who want to just take advantage of new things because it's more easier, and they had it much more harder than us, and they still want to cling into the old ways, while we dismiss them and laugh at them and chastise them. But in this movie, I think in this movie, the older guy, the older version of James, may be onto something. He seems very sincere in his delivery, even though he can be a bit of a pest. The older James simply just wants to anchor down and enjoy the better qualities of life, like friends and family and colleagues who may be more than just lab partners. Because Jonas is such a workaholic that he doesn't have time for the things that he has to his advantage already. James is just trying to set this dude straight. And sometimes the things that you have now doesn't require long hours working on something that shouldn't be invented to begin with. While young James, all he just wants to do is to invent newer apparatuses and just making a name for himself. So when it comes down to it, who are we to judge in determining who's right or wrong? I mean, we get to actually take the freedom to pick who we want. Do we want to side with older James, that sometimes life doesn't always have to be filled with big fancy inventions, and the things that you have right in front of you is an invention as it is? Or would you rather be like on team younger James, where the more newer stuff we have, the cooler we are? And should James listen to his elder self's advice and settle in the now? Or should we just build something that could potentially destroy humanity? The nice thing about this film, which was written and directed by Jeremy Lalonde, is that we, the audience, have the freedoms to pick a side. Sure, both Jimmys are not entirely likable. One's a workaholic, another one is an annoying nuisance. They do the complex task of determining which Jimmy is right and which one is wrong. Are you on team young Jimmy, or are you on team old Jimmy? Hey, the choice is yours. Just use your choices wisely. Now, unlike Back to the Future movies, and there's nothing personal about them, where they tend to glorify time travel and make it cool, James versus his future self counteracts it all by saying that time travel is not a good idea. Jimmy wants James to concentrate on getting romantically linked to his fellow physicist, Courtney, played by Cleopatra Coleman, and to treat her as an equal and not just a mere sidekick. Eventually, James weighs down on himself, as we expect. He's progressively open up his feelings to her and listen in on what she feels is right too. So I mean, even though the main people who are carrying the load are Jonas Chernick and Daniel Stern, even though it's quite obvious that Daniel Stern, being the experienced veteran that he is, a guy whose acting career spans about roughly four and a half decades, been in a slew full of movies. Of course, everybody's famous Christmas baddie himself, Marv. Don't worry, this movie he's not gonna get smashed in the head with an iron. He's not gonna have a nail stuck to his foot. He's not gonna have a big heavy bookshelf full of paint cans dropped on him, or getting electrocuted, or or having a whole flock of birds come by and peck at his skin. That scene was funny. No, none of that. But he is still going to be over the top. He's still going to provide that well-needed comic effect. But he's also, you know, going to be. But he's also very intelligent. He's very philosophical, and he also just wants to set his younger version of himself straight. Don't worry, I got it on. And to just I mean, when it comes down to this movie, it's like to. Yes, I'm almost finished. It's like, past, present, and future are, colliding in here. I mean, whatever's happens in the past should stay in the past. The present is how you can work on things in hopes that the future could blossom. You know, keep things in the past, work on the present in hopes for the future. That's how past, present, and future operates in humanity. Like I said, even though, like I said, Jonas Chernick and Daniel Stern carry the bulk of the movie, and Cleopatra Coleman does her fine job of being the lab partner, eventually later love interest to James. The smaller supporting roles here were just as equally entertaining. Just give it some time. Tommie Amber-Pirie is also excellent as James's sister Meredith.
Worst thing is closing that door.
While Tara Spencer-Nairn, who of course played Constable Karen Pelly on the TV series Corner Gas, she is once again back again in the fuzz again as Officer No Nonsense Officer Walker. They just like to see Tara in a cop costume again. She just can't seem to break away from it. It's just kind of funny and also ironic. Francis Conroy has an interesting role as Dr. Rowley, who is just as enthusiastic about this time machine, who at times may come off as an eccentric, but also very highly intelligent. Jeremy Lalonde and Jonas Chernick never tried to downplay the character's intellect, or just have other ways for them to wallow in self-defeat. The conflicts between both Jimmys is similar to the traditional father and son arguments, and they definitely have a nice chemistry towards one another, and it's effective in its storytelling. Even though, hey, we have Daniel Stern, and you know how that guy has a habit of overacting. You don't believe me? Watch the Home Alone and the City Slickers movies. One more paragraph. If there's any weaknesses in this movie, here is that there are scenes that lag from time to time, and though the romance is an integral part of the movie, and we hope a relationship between James and Courtney are in the future, it still slows things down a little bit. And sure, there are laughs that might tickle your funny bone, and there are some scenes that are not afraid to take it down a notch. It's still very effective. And while it may fall as another movie where the future looks bleak, it never takes a break to go off the subject. And sure, it may hold itself well when it comes to sci-fi comedies. You may not really have an easy time choosing who's right and who's wrong. Are you on Team Young Jimmy or Team Old Jimmy? The choice is yours. Use it with caution. So, with all that said and done, if I was to give this movie a scale out of 10, I would give James versus his future self a 7 out of 10. Would I recommend you guys to see this movie? Sure, but just remember, it's an independent movie. It's very low budget, so don't get too much of your expectations high. But it is very deeply philosophical and intelligent, and it makes you sometimes think twice about the decisions you make in life. And let's hope that you can find your decisions that you make, make it wisely. So I guess this ends my writer review. Thank you all for listening in. If you wish to subscribe to my channel, please feel free to do so. And if you wish to leave a comment, go right ahead. But just remember the 3 simple rules: be kind, be courteous, and please refrain from any rude comments. And I will be back again with another movie review. So until next time, this is Eric Red Writer saying keep watching those movies, and I'll see you around. Goodbye.